What is up, guys? It's Yara Wins, and in this video I'm going to bring you something that a few of you have requested recently, and essentially I'm going to cover all bases with tactics from ultra defensive to ultra attacking, and I'm going to explain with all of these different tactics specifically when I would use them in a match, when I feel those systems are most effective, what the general idea of the tactics are, and essentially give you a basis to work from for FUT Champions, because I believe tactics are an individual thing and different for everyone. But these are mine, and you can basically look at them and slightly modify them for your own team and your own players and your own playing style. But yeah, I'm going to just quickly go through each of the individual tactics and explain them. So what I would start a match in would be the 4-2-3-1. Now, I've seen various pros and various elite players that they start quite conservatively. Obviously, with the 4-2-3-1 formation, you have that defensive support, obviously, with the two CDMs. You've got quite a lot of attacking options with the cams, and you've got one striker. So, in general, it's a very balanced formation, and it's definitely one of the best ones to start a game with, because you generally aren't leaving yourself open. You can sort of work your way into the game, get possession, and generally not give away too many chances. Now, in terms of the actual tactics for the 4-2-3-1, I believe defensive style, you could go for pressure if you really want to risk it, but as I've been saying, with the idea that you want to start a game, slowly get into it, not leave spaces, and gradually sort of understand your opponent, understand what you want to play, what kind of style you want to play in that particular match, I think balanced is the way to go, because it basically won't leave you too open at the back. Now, in terms of width, as I'm sure a lot of you have experienced or have heard, a lot of people right now are spamming the through ball tactic. So, for example, if you're too wide, you're going to leave those spaces in between your players that are going to be exploitable for players basically spamming those through balls through. Now, in terms of the 4-2-3-1 having a decent amount of width in itself, just in the way the formation is, you don't really want a high width in the defensive style. So 4 bars generally will be enough to close down those pockets of space and keep your team quite compressed on the defensive. And then that basically leads on to the depth. As this is a sort of a starting system, you're going to want it quite deep. So maybe 3 or 4 bars. This is for you to understand how your opponent plays, understanding how aggressive he is, and basically sitting off and not being too aggressive and not conceding early goals, because that is often a problem for a lot of people, and that can basically throw off your entire game plan if you concede early. So being quite conservative, I think, is the way forward at the start of games. In terms of the offensive style, I personally like fast build-up, because although you can leave yourself open for a counter-attack, it really depends on what players you have. Because, for example, I have quite fast players throughout the team. So my centre-backs and my wing-backs, they all have high pace. I've got a lot of players with high stamina. So I can get away with players running back and forth, and I'm not too worried about players getting in behind, because I can generally chase them down because I've got enough pace in my defense. That's on the defensive side. On the attacking side, I like counter-attacking myself, and because I've got a hell of a lot of pace in my attackers as well, it is probably one of the more effective attacking styles that you can implement. So as you're going to be forcing your players to get forward, I personally prefer the fast build-up as opposed to a slow possession style. So because you're going to be quite negative in a way in the defense, you're going to be sitting back. You're going to want your players, when they do win the ball, to quickly transition to the other side of the pitch and basically get up there in the attack. Now, for the team width, offensive width, you're going to go probably around the balanced 5 mark, maybe 4. I personally have it on 5, and the same with the players in the box, because you want to have enough support, but you don't want to be going too much or sending too many players forward. Because remember, this is just your starting system. There's going to be more offensive options that I'm going to go on to, but starting off, you don't want to overcommit basically. So having it nice and balanced on around 5 bars, I think that is the way to go. Now, in terms of the instructions for my central striker, the support runs staying central. I want that one attacker to always be in those central positions to obviously get in the box for crosses or be in that position for through balls. So stay central, get in behind, stay forward. Now, because I have Goretzka as a cam and he's sort of a box-to-box player but can do a very good job in the offensive side as well as the defensive side, I have him coming back on defense but also getting into the box. So he basically does the double job. As for my left and right attacking mid, Mbappe, and I sub on 99 Messi on the right side, I have stay forward, get into the box and free roam for them with conservative interceptions in the interest of stamina. Because these guys, they play a free role really, in terms of free roam of course in the position freedom, but they can sometimes become strikers, they can become wingers, or they can become cams. So I like personally having that freedom of attacking play, and it creates unpredictability as well. So that is the reason behind that. And for your CDMs, personally I'd recommend having a mixture. So one of the CDMs man marking and the other one cutting the passing lanes, because you do personally I do want someone to get tight to those midfielders, opposition midfielders, not allow them to start dictating play, and stay back while attacking, obviously covering centre and staying back with your right and left back. Now, that's confirmed, and we can move on to the attacking system. Now, a lot of you have asked me about the 4-2-2, and it can be great sometimes, and it can be a bit open on the defensive side sometimes. It is very inconsistent in my experience, at least in the last couple of weeks. But I do like it in the terms of having 2 strikers, 2 cams, 2 CDMs. It is on paper very balanced. And generally I do like having an extra striker as opposed to more cams. So when I'm starting to look for goals, or I've understood that I'm on top of the opponent, I can sometimes switch to the 4-2-2. Again, saying that, I also go to a more attacking and a more aggressive system where I change to pressure and heavy touch. So obviously we had balanced on the 4-2-3-1 system, because that's where we try to understand the opponent. We're not going sort of too all out. We're not pressing until we know how good our opponent is, what his strengths are, what his weaknesses are. But once you have established that, you can switch to the 4-2-2 and you can go to a more pressure tactic. And it does take practice, because if you're too reckless with it, you're going to leave a lot of spaces and you're going to get caught a lot. But once you've got it down to a T and you're pressing well, you're jockeying well, covering spaces, it is a very effective defensive style. Again, for the width, because this formation is even wider in itself than the 4-2-3-1, you're going to want to keep that defensive width quite low, so around 4 bars. For the depth, you're going to go quite a bit higher than the 4-2-3-1, because, as I say, in order to effectively press, you don't want to be sitting back too deep. You want to gradually push your team forward, win the ball high up the pitch, and then obviously transition to the attack. Now, for the offensive style, long ball, because you have 2 strikers now and 2 cams, I believe it is very effective when you have players running in behind. So that can be over the top through balls or driven passes. But the key thing is your strikers will be making those runs in behind. That is the reason for the offensive style of long ball. And you're going to slightly up the width, potentially to 6, or you can keep it at 5, because again, it really depends on the opponent and how they play, because a lot of players right now, they're parking the bus. Sometimes it is important to have extra width. I personally counteract that sometimes by using D-pad tactics and basically attacking with fullbacks or hugging the sideline. So generally I would recommend having it quite balanced and then editing that or amending that with the D-pad tactics. Players in the box, I think 6 is the slightly above balanced option, but if you're going to be playing a lot of crosses, depending on how you play with those cams, you're going to want more players going forward. And if you have a team with high stamina, they can basically run up and down the pitch, and you're going to be forcing the opponent back and more of his opponent or the opponent players to basically go back and defend, and they won't have more support when they counter-attack you. In terms of the corners, again, this is totally up to you, but I've started going a bit lower with corners and free kicks because I was getting caught on the counter at times. So I believe that 2 is sufficient, depending on if you play short corners or you try and win headers in there. But again, it's completely up to you. I personally play 2, but I wouldn't say that there's a specific rule for it. Now, in terms of the instructions, for your 2 strikers, you want both staying forward, both to get in behind, obviously with the long ball tactic. But one of them, well, for me, I have a balanced width for one of them because sometimes you don't want both players sticking close to each other. You want sometimes that freedom of movement because that will draw away defenders. That might give more space for the other striker. And in some games, that is very important. With your 2 cams, again, I'm quite aggressive with it. I have stay forward on both, get into the box for my right cam, who's Messi, and free roam and conservative interceptions. I don't really need these players to be defending too much, or specifically in this case, Messi. And I kind of counteract that on the other side by having basic defensive support for Goretzka, still getting into the box. So he still does an offensive job, but I also want him to be an additional sort of defensive player that can help out as well. Now, again, the same tactics for the CDMs as the previous formation. You want that balance, and again, with the right and left back, also stay back while attacking. So that's the 4-2-3-1 and the 4-2-2-2. Now we're going to go on to the 2 final formation and systems, and these are really for specific matches or specific times in games where, for example, you're struggling to break down an opponent or you're chasing a game from behind. I have found that, obviously you've seen my video probably, the 4-1-2-1-2 second variation. It's still very effective for me, but this is a slight variation on that with some slight tweaks. But again, pressure and heavy touch, I think, is when you're chasing the game, you need that defensive style. You need to press. You need to keep winning the ball back as quickly as possible, putting pressure on your opponent and starting attacks as quickly as possible as well. With the width, because this is a very narrow formation, you're going to up the width a bit and up the depth a bit because, again, as I say, you're going to want to win the ball as quickly as possible and as high as possible, but also not being too reckless, not leaving too many gaps in behind. You could even bump that up to about 7, but I think 6 or 7 is sufficient, and it's not over the top. It's not like a maximum 10. Now, again, offensive style, just as the 4-2-2-2, because you've got 2 strikers, you want those players running in behind. And in this formation, obviously, you have a central cam, who's going to be basically playmaking, putting those balls through to your strikers. And this particular tactic I found is very effective, especially if you have players with great attack positioning, because they can basically break the offside trap or get in those gaps between defenders. And yeah, generally that is the best tactic, I believe. Now, for the offensive width, again, similar logic to the defensive. Because the formation itself is quite narrow, you're going to want to up that a little bit to basically create more space and not be too compressed in the middle of the pitch. Players in the box, you're going to up that to 7. As I say, this is when you're chasing games. You're going to be wanting to push as many players as possible up top without leaving yourself too exposed at the back. So I think 7 is pretty much enough. Again, as I say, for free kicks, I don't really score from free kicks indirectly or in terms of some set piece routine. I always shoot directly if I do score from them. So I don't necessarily need anyone going forward. However, for corners, you could up that to 3 or 4, but not 5, let's say. Now, for the instructions, you're going to have balance width on both strikers. Getting behind, stay forward. Because as this is a very narrow formation, sometimes you'll want both strikers going a bit wide and pulling away defenders. Because, for example, Messi is the cam. And let's say Richarlison and Mbappe are up top. They can sometimes be a distraction and essentially pull away centre-backs for Messi to get those runs through in the middle. So for the cam, you want him staying forward, getting to the box of the cross, free roam, and conservative interceptions. For your left and right centre mid, I personally have balanced covering centre and getting the box for Goretzka because he has good shooting stats. For Kante, the CDM, cut passing lanes, drop between defenders, aggressive interceptions, and covering centre. And for your right centre mid, stay back, stay on edge of the box, aggressive interceptions as well. Although, for example, for Henderson, you can have him on balanced. If you have someone like that can also shoot and defend, you can have him balanced. For your left and right back, you're still going to have it on stay back while attacking. However, this is the formation where you will use the D-pad tactics to manually push forward your fullbacks. It's just you don't want them always going forward automatically because that's going to leave a lot of spaces in behind. So that's almost everything, but obviously we have just the ultra defensive tactic to go over. And for me, I very rarely use this, but sometimes when you just need to hold out for the last few minutes of the game, you might have to use this negative tactic. So the 5-4-1, I believe, is just, it gives the least amount of space to your opponent because you have obviously a flat line of 5 and a flat line of 4, and then your striker up top. So drop back defensive style, 3 width, 3 depth, possession offensive style because you're going to want to keep possession if you do have the ball, not sort of commit too forward. The width, offensive width, I've gone a bit higher here because when you're defending, obviously because it's a very wide formation, or you have a lot of bodies in those 2 straight lines in the defense and the midfield, you're going to want a bit more width on the offensive because you're going to want those left and right midfielders to stay forward and essentially get counterattacks. And you're going to slightly want to go wider when you're attacking than when you're defending. Now, players in the box, only 3. You're only going to want your left, right mid, and striker to basically go forward. Corners and free kicks at 1. And in terms of the instructions, for your 1 striker, stay central, getting behind, stay forward, because who knows, you can always get a counter-attack opportunity. You always want at least someone staying forward, and you've got more than enough support in the midfield and the defense already. Now, for your left and right mid, you also want them staying forward, cutting inside, getting in behind, getting to the box. For your 2 centre mids, stay back, stay on edge of the box, cover centre. Left back, right back, obviously, stay back while attacking. And I've dropped my CDM into that centre back position. Now, if you have someone like Kante, you could potentially go for aggressive interceptions because he's slightly ahead of the other 2 centre backs. And he can act as like a very, very deep lying CDM. So essentially, yeah, those are the tactics, guys. Hope I've explained when and how you'd use them. And yeah, just try them out in FUT Champs. Obviously, this is not a set rule. You can edit them slightly to your own team specification or your own players or maybe your own playing style. But in general, I hope it's been an informative guide for you. It's been a long one, but I think it was worth going into detail explaining all the aspects of it. So yeah, guys, if this video helped you out, drop a like, drop a comment with any questions. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet. And yeah, if you have any other specific requests, just drop them down below in the comments. And yeah, I may make individual videos on specific formations with the highlights from games if you wish. So let me know, guys. And yeah, I'll catch you soon. Peace.